everyone, welcome back to iTalk. I am Chu Yao. In the last video, we shared Chinese perspectives on Afghan influence on the current war order and great powers rivalries in Afghanistan. In today's video, we will talk about how Chinese scholars perceive and interpret the impact of Afghanistan on regional and global geopolitical order. Today, we are going to share 3 articles from Chinese scholars. The first article is from Dr. Lou Chunhao, Afghanistan at a Crossroads and the Ripple Effects of Changing Geopolitical Order. The second article is from Dr. Wang Shida, Dramatic Changes in the Geopolitical Order of Afghanistan. The third article is from Professor Wang Jianwei on whether the US withdrawal from Afghanistan represents the end of the US hegemony. Scholars like Lou Chunhao conceive geopolitical influences which resulted from the political upheaval in Afghanistan should not be underestimated. Many believe that the Taliban's return to Kabul and their establishment of new government has ushered the nation into a new era. Dr. Lou pointed out that the current political environment in Afghanistan had once again undergone fundamental changes. Major powers had redesigned their strategic plans to cope with new cycles of rivalry. According to Dr. Lou's article, the changing politics in Afghanistan has shifted political attitudes in the US. First, he talked about American stubbornness on the handling of Afghan issue. The collapse of the US-supported Ghani former government has not only damaged the global reputation of the US, but also weakened the US network of allies. Although former US President Obama outlined the preliminary plan of withdrawing US troops from Afghanistan, it was not fully implemented until President Biden took office, represented the shift of US strategies. It embodied that the new US strategic priority would be on the great power strategic rivalries instead of international cooperation in the fight against terrorism. Dr. Lou believed that this shift of US strategy would negatively affect China-US relations and even China-Russia relations, hinting at the intensifying rivalry between the United States and China, also between the United States and Russia. Dr. Lou also talked about the impact of Afghan issue on its neighboring countries. He proposed that as the neighboring countries, excluding China, are bound to Afghanistan by ties of ethnicity, culture, and religion, they are inevitably and involuntarily involved in the domestic affairs of Afghanistan to varying degrees. Consequently, while the geopolitical factors have profoundly influenced the Afghanistan's issues, they also have the potential to shape regional geopolitical dynamics.
The Lou further summarized that the political environment in Afghanistan was like the first domino, and any further changes might trigger the other dominoes to fall.
Faced with the so-called power vacuum left by US withdrawal from Afghanistan, countries in the region have the desire to fill that void, initiating a new round of rivalry. Many believe that the changing regional geopolitical dynamic would set up a resonance in the domestic situation in Afghanistan. Like Dr. Lou, Wang Shida also gave his insights on Afghanistan's issues, as well as how they brought changes to the regional and global geopolitical order. Dr. Wang's viewpoints can briefly be summarized to the following 3 points. Firstly, although the US withdrew from Afghanistan, it still has crucial influences on the situation in Afghanistan, especially in security aspect.
The United States would not only try to maintain its intelligence gathering, war fighting, and counterterrorism operations in the country, but also cooperate with the neighboring countries of Afghanistan in an attempt to operate new military bases there. Moreover, the US would also use its current military bases in the Middle East to exert influences on the domestic situation in the country. Therefore, the Afghan situation will continue to affect the regional and global geopolitical order. Secondly, as we talked about in the last video, the ongoing change in Afghanistan has constantly affected and been affected by its neighboring countries. For example, India and Pakistan relations have been one of the most significant geopolitical conflicts influencing the evolution of the Afghan issue. With the Afghan Taliban came to power, Indian-Pakistan relations might be affected by it to varying degrees. Thirdly, the deterioration of the Afghan security will negatively impact Russia and Central Asia because of drug smuggling, refugee problems, etc. In recent years, Russia has been paying more attention to Afghanistan and willing to be more involved in the relevant affairs. Consequently, Russia has now become one of the key participants of the Afghan issues. From the perspective of Russia, the U.S. hasty withdrawal from Afghanistan was irresponsible and was intending to set up a geopolitical trap for great powers' rivalry.
Differing from Dr. Lou, Professor Wang Jianwei from Macau University reckoned that the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan did not profoundly influence its strategic position in the region nor its status as a dominant power in the world. Thus, it would not be accurate nor appropriate to use the words like irreversible and termination of the U.S. hegemony when analyzing the U.S. failure in the region. Professor Wang Jianwei further added that President Biden was not forced to move forward the date of the retreat. Therefore, the U.S. failure in Afghanistan had a relatively limited impact on its global leadership role.
Referencing America's 1975 retreat from Vietnam, he pointed out that many people back then conceived that U.S. failure in Vietnam marked the termination of U.S. hegemony. However, the U.S. has stepped out of the shadow of its failure in Vietnam in less than 10 years, initiated the Second Cold War towards the Soviet Union, and eventually regained the victory.
Despite their differences, Professor Wang Jianwei and Dr. Lou both suggested that, from the perspective of global strategic position, a critical motive behind the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan was to shrink the U.S. presence in the Middle East, transferring the focus toward China, the biggest strategic and security threat of the United States. After sharing the three scholars' viewpoints, it has become evident that the political future in Afghanistan still faces a multitude of uncertainties. The changing situation in Afghanistan would not only affect the geopolitical order in its surrounding area, but also the international community and even the world order. That's all for today. Thank you for listening.